The projector in the conference room was still humming when my security badge blinked from green to red. Just like that, 15 years of my life reduced to a flicker of light. My name is Laura Price. I'm 45 years old, and I stood there watching something worth $1.9 billion get taken from me in under 5 minutes. Ethan Cole, the CEO's son, didn't even look at me when he said it. He adjusted his cufflinks, leaned casually against the table, and spoke to the room like he was announcing quarterly results. Effective immediately. Full ownership of the Helix core system will be transferred to Cole Dynamics. But before I tell you why their entire legal team stayed up all night in full panic mode right after firing me, take a second to hit the like button. And I'm genuinely curious, where are you watching from? What time is it where you are right now? Because trust me, this story is about to get a lot more interesting from here. Now, let me explain what Helix Core really is. My life's work. A next-generation encryption architecture I had built from scratch line by line, system by system, over more than a decade. The backbone of half the company's defense contracts. The reason this company even mattered. And now, it belonged to him. No one said a word, not the CFO sitting across from me, not the legal team who had drafted my original contracts, not even the engineers whose careers I had personally built. Silence, heavy, calculated, cowardly. I slowly closed my laptop, my hands steady in a way that surprised even me. I gathered my notes, stood up, and finally, Ethan looked at me. He was waiting for a reaction, anger, begging, anything. Instead, I asked one simple question. Ethan, are you sure you've read Clause 21.3? A flicker of confusion crossed his face. I signed the termination papers without hesitation, slid them back across the table, and walked toward the door. Then I paused, hand resting on the frame. Enjoy the spotlight, I said quietly. Morning comes faster than you think. He didn't understand. None of them did. But they would. A quick note: this story is fictional, inspired by real workplace situations. Some details are enhanced with AI to make it more vivid and meaningful. Now, let's continue. They thought I walked out defeated, that I had just signed away everything and accepted it. What Ethan didn't understand was that Helix Core was never just code. It was protection layered, deliberate, and designed with one assumption in mind: sooner or later, someone would try to take it. 15 years ago, when I first joined Cole Dynamics, the company was still a small, engineer-driven firm. Back then, the founder, Richard Hale, actually respected the people building the technology. We worked side by side, late nights, whiteboards filled with equations, both of us obsessed with getting things right, and more importantly, protecting them. That's where Clause 21.3 came in. We called it the Mirror Vault Clause, not something flashy or obvious. It was buried deep inside the legal framework of my employment agreement. Written in language most executives would skim past without a second thought, but it was precise. Any transfer of intellectual property tied to Helix Core required dual authentication. My verified authorization, paired with confirmation from the Federal Patent Registry, not one or the other, both. If either piece was missing, the system wouldn't just reject the transfer, it would automatically revert full ownership back to the original creator. Me. It wasn't a loophole. It wasn't a trick. It was a safeguard. A legal mechanism designed to ensure that no one, no matter how powerful, could quietly take control of something they didn't build. Over the years, as the company grew and leadership changed, that clause remained untouched. Lawyers came and went, contracts were updated, expanded, restructured, but no one ever questioned that section, because people like Ethan never imagined they'd need to. What they saw was a signature, a termination, a clean transfer. What they didn't see was the verification layer still waiting in the background, inactive but intact. The moment he pushed that ownership change without completing the authentication process, he triggered it, and once triggered, it didn't stop halfway, it just waited. Waiting gave me time to think about everything that had led to this moment. Helix Core didn't appear overnight. It wasn't the result of a team brainstorming session or some executive vision deck. It started in a cramped lab with outdated equipment and a problem no one else wanted to solve. I built the first version alone, rewriting entire modules from scratch when they failed, sleeping in that office more nights than I can count. There were years when the system barely worked, years when every breakthrough came at the cost of something else. Missed holidays, broken relationships, endless nights debugging failures that only I fully understood. When clients panicked at 3 a.m. because their systems were collapsing, I was the one they called, not Ethan, not the board, me. By the time Helix Core became the backbone of our defense and financial contracts, I had already given more than a decade of my life to it. I trained the engineers, built the architecture, secured the patents, and stood between the company and every major system failure that could have destroyed its reputation. Back then, Richard Hale understood that. He valued the work, the process, the people behind it, but when he sold the company and stepped away, everything changed. Coal Dynamics stopped being a place that built things. It became a place that packaged them. Lawyers replaced engineers in decision-making. Presentations mattered more than precision. And people like Ethan walked in, treating innovation like an inherited asset instead of something earned. The shift was gradual, almost invisible at first. Fewer late-night problem-solving sessions, more boardroom strategies, less respect for the work, more focus on ownership and control. And somewhere along the way, Helix Core stopped being seen as something created. It became something to claim. That was the moment the company stopped recognizing what it had. And the moment it became vulnerable. I didn't go anywhere near the office after that. There was nothing left there for me. My apartment was quiet when I walked in. The kind of silence that lets your thoughts get louder. In the corner, my private server tower hummed steadily. It had never been connected to the company's network. That had always been intentional. I powered up my terminal and began running a diagnostic on the encryption seed tied to my authorization credentials. Line after line scrolled across the screen, each confirmation exactly where it should be. Then I saw it. A secondary process had activated in the background. Sunrise Protocol. I hadn't touched that system in years, but I recognized it instantly. It was the final layer Richard and I had designed. A failsafe buried deep within the architecture. Not aggressive, not destructive. Just absolute. It would remain dormant unless the system detected an unauthorized ownership transfer tied to my patents. And once triggered, it wouldn't stop. A countdown pulsed quietly on the screen, synchronized with federal verification systems. No alerts, no warnings sent to the company, just time. Running out. Around midnight. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I let it ring once before answering. Laura, it's Daniel from legal. His voice was low, tense, not the polished tone he used in meetings. They don't know. Do they? He said quickly. The clause? It's still active. I leaned back, watching the timer tick down in steady intervals. No, I replied. They don't. There was a pause, followed by a quiet exhale on the other end. They're planning a press announcement in the morning. Full ownership claim, media, investors, everything. I didn't respond right away. Then they should prepare for what comes after, I said calmly. Daniel hesitated. Laura, once this goes public, there's no way to contain it. I know. The line went silent for a second before he spoke again. Softer this time. Some of us tried to warn them. I'm sure you did. The call ended, on my screen. The countdown continued. No noise, no panic. Just inevitability moving forward. Second by second. Morning came faster than most of them expected. I drove to a small cafe across the street from Coal Dynamics. The kind of place where no one looks twice at you. The TV above the counter was already tuned to a business channel. Volume low, captions running. At exactly 9 a.m., Ethan appeared on screen. Perfect suit, confident posture, that polished expression he'd practiced 1,000 times. Today, he began. Coal Dynamics proudly confirms full ownership of Helix Core, a breakthrough encryption platform that will define the future of global security. I almost smiled. Around me, people glanced up from their phones, mildly interested. A couple of employees from the building nodded like they were watching something expected, something already decided. Ethan kept going, his voice steady, rehearsed. This achievement represents years of collaborative innovation and strategic vision. Under our leadership, Helix Core will reach its full potential in protecting critical infrastructure worldwide. Collaborative. That word sat wrong. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness settle. He was standing there, speaking about systems he had never touched, decisions he had never made, nights he had never endured, and the market loved it. A ticker rolled across the bottom of the screen. Coal Dynamics stock up 11% following Helix Core acquisition. Investors were buying the story. That was the real problem, not just the theft, but the narrative built around it. Ethan didn't just take the work, he repackaged it, reshaped it, and sold it as something he deserved. My phone started buzzing soon after. Messages from engineers, former teammates. Is this real? Did you actually sign it over? He's saying he led development. I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that would matter right now, because the truth wasn't something I needed to argue. It was already in motion, and when it surfaced, it wouldn't need explanation by the afternoon. An invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, delivered by courier like it actually meant something. An appreciation dinner honoring key contributors to the Helix Core project. Key contributors. Not creator, not architect, just contributor. I almost didn't go, but something about the timing felt too precise to ignore. The restaurant was exactly what you'd expect. Marble floors, low lighting, the kind of place where success is measured by how expensive everything looks. When I walked in, Ethan greeted me like we were celebrating together. "Laura," he said with a practiced smile. "Glad you could make it. After all, none of this would have been possible without your early contributions." Early contributions. I shook his hand anyway. "I appreciate the acknowledgement," I replied. "It's been rare lately." The table was filled with executives, legal advisors, and a few familiar faces who avoided eye contact the moment I sat down. Ethan took the head seat, his father beside him, both of them glowing with the kind of confidence that comes from believing the story you're telling. Glasses were raised, speeches were made. "To innovation," Ethan said, standing tall, "to leadership, and to the future of Helix Core under Coal Dynamics." Applause followed. I watched quietly, letting the moment stretch. When he finally sat down, I spoke just loud enough for the table to hear. "Ownership transitions can be tricky," I said, cutting into my meal. "Systems like Helix Core tend to be sensitive, especially when verification layers are involved." A few people chuckled, assuming it was technical small talk. Ethan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Our legal team has everything fully documented." "I'm sure they do," I replied calmly. "Just make sure everything's properly verified before sunrise." That word hung in the air for a second longer than it should have. A subtle shift passed through the table. A few glances, a flicker of uncertainty. Ethan didn't ask what I meant. He should have, because the clock wasn't waiting for his understanding. It was already moving. The next part of this story only gets more intense, so hit the like button. And let's keep going together. Dessert had just been served when the first crack appeared. A young server approached the table, holding a cream-colored envelope with both hands like it weighed more than it should. The official seal on the front caught the light just enough to draw attention. "Delivery for Mr. Ethan Cole," he said, voice slightly uncertain. Ethan frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Now?" he asked, glancing around the table as if timing itself should obey him. The server nodded and stepped back. Ethan took the envelope, turning it over once before tearing it open. At first, his expression didn't change. Then it did. Subtle, but unmistakable. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved faster across the page, and for a fraction of a second, the confidence slipped. "What is it?" his father asked. Leaning slightly closer, "Nothing important," Ethan replied quickly, folding the paper with a bit too much care. Just a routine verification request from the patent office. Routine. The word didn't land the way he wanted it to. From where I sat. I didn't need to see the document to know exactly what it said. Discrepancy detected in ownership transfer. Immediate authentication required. The system had reached its first checkpoint. Around the table. Conversation slowed. Then resumed in fragments. People sensed something had shifted. Even if they couldn't name it yet. Ethan lifted his glass, forcing a smile. As I was saying, Helix Core is now fully integrated under Coal Dynamics, and we're already seeing strong market response, but his hand wasn't steady. Not quite. His father watched him more closely now. The earlier pride replaced by something sharper. Calculation, concern. I set my fork down, dabbing my napkin lightly against the corner of my mouth. Verification processes can be unpredictable, I said calmly, especially when federal systems get involved. Ethan didn't respond this time. He just nodded once, too quickly, and took a drink. The room felt different now, not tense, not yet, but no longer certain, and uncertainty, once it appears, has a way of spreading. By the time I got home, the city had quieted down, but I knew they hadn't. I didn't expect the call to come so soon. My phone rang just past midnight. This time, the number wasn't hidden. Laura, Charles Cole said, his voice controlled but strained. We need to talk. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. I'm listening. There seems to be some confusion. He continued carefully. The patent office flagged irregularities in the transfer documentation. Our legal team is reviewing it now. I leaned back in my chair, watching the soft glow of my monitor. There's no confusion, I said calmly. The system is working exactly as it was designed to. A pause followed. Longer this time. What system, he asked. Clause 21.3. The Mirror Vault Protocol. The safeguard your company agreed to 15 years ago. I could almost hear him shifting, papers moving, someone in the background being muted. Laura, he said, voice lowering. Ethan made a mistake. He's young. These things happen. We can fix this. Fix. That word again. What are you offering? I asked. Whatever it takes. He replied quickly. Compensation, a senior position, equity. Public credit if that's what you want. We can correct the narrative. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the city lights. This isn't about money, I said. Then what is it? He pressed. It's about recognition, about truth, about the difference between building something and claiming it. His tone hardened slightly. You're putting the entire company at risk over this. No, I replied. Your son did that the moment he signed something he didn't understand. Silence again. Then, quieter this time. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. I want what's mine to be acknowledged, and I want the system to do what it was built to do. He didn't argue after that, because somewhere, deep down, he already knew how this would end. At 4:30 a.m., I was already awake, not because I was nervous, but because I knew exactly what was coming. My screen displayed the system diagnostics in real time, authentication protocols syncing with federal databases, encryption layers aligning, verification requests moving through channels no one at Coal Dynamics could override. Everything was in place. At 5:45 a.m., the first light of sunrise cut across the skyline, and the system responded. Sunrise protocol activated. It didn't explode. It didn't crash anything violently. It simply enforced reality. Across Coal Dynamics, every system connected to Helix Core initiated the same sequence. Access requests were denied. Ownership credentials failed verification. Then, one by one, every interface displayed the same message. License revoked. Federal Registry override in effect. Authorized owner, Laura Price. Inside their headquarters. Screens went dark, then flickered back with that single line replacing everything. No code, no data, no control. Within minutes, The effects spread outward. Financial institutions relying on Helix core encryption reported system interruptions. Transaction networks stalled. Defense communication channels flagged authorization errors. Automated alerts began cascading through sectors that had trusted the infrastructure without question. By 6:10 a.m., the first emergency calls were being made. By 6:30, the market opened. And then it dropped. Coal Dynamics stock plunged faster than anyone could contain. Investors who had bought into Ethan's announcement the day before were now watching their positions collapse in real time. My phone started ringing again. This time, Charles didn't try to stay composed. "Laura, what did you do?" His voice was sharp, strained, stripped of negotiation. I stepped onto my balcony, watching the sunlight spread across the city. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "The system is doing exactly what it was built to do." There was chaos behind his silence. Then one final detail reached me through a breaking news alert. Federal authorities had opened an investigation because what Ethan had called ownership was now being examined for something else entirely. By noon, the headlines were everywhere. Coal Dynamics in crisis, stock collapse, federal investigation underway. Footage showed executives rushing in and out of the building, reporters gathering outside, investors staring at their phones in disbelief. What had been announced as a breakthrough less than 24 hours earlier was now being questioned in full public view. Ethan didn't make another appearance. Instead, images surfaced of him being escorted out through a side entrance. No longer confident, no longer composed. The narrative had shifted, and it wasn't something he could control anymore. By mid-afternoon, Charles Cole released a statement. He was stepping down, effective immediately. The official reason mentioned health concerns, but no one believed that. The board needed distance. Someone had to take the fall before the investigation went further. Coal Dynamics didn't collapse in a single moment, but it never recovered. Contracts were suspended. Partners withdrew. What remained was a company stripped of the very thing that had made it valuable. 6 months later, I was sitting in a different office, smaller, quieter, built on clarity instead of politics. The name on the glass door read Price Security Systems. Across from me sat Daniel, the same lawyer who had called that night now, part of a team that actually understood what they were protecting. We had rebuilt Helix Core into something stronger, cleaner, and fully under the control of the people who created it. New contracts came in, larger ones, more transparent. And then, one morning, I received an official letter, a federal recognition award for contributions to national security technology. No ambiguity, no shared credit, just my name. For the first time in years, the work spoke for itself. And this time, it wasn't taken. If you choose to stand your ground, defend your work, and let the truth speak for itself, as I did right, absolutely true, so I know I'm not wrong. If you remain silent, accepting injustice to survive, then write silence. Or if you have your own way of handling things, I'd love to hear it. There was a moment when I could have stayed quiet, accepted the offer, and walked away with comfort instead of conflict, but I didn't. And now I understand why. This story wasn't just about losing something valuable. It was about standing up for what I created and refusing to let it be erased. From everything that happened, I've taken away 5 lessons I'll carry for the rest of my life. First, always protect your work before you need to defend it. Second, don't expect fairness from people who benefit from your silence. Third, your value isn't defined by your title, but by what you build. Fourth, timing and patience can be more powerful than confrontation. And finally, truth doesn't need to shout, it proves itself over time. I don't know what you would have done in my place, but maybe this story made you pause and reflect in your own way. If it did, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if you felt something from this story, consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it too.